At the end of the day, all CMOs today are being judged more precisely on numbers versus sort of soft metrics like brand awareness.
So today, apart from brand building, CMOs are also being judged on revenues. One, is that the right move? And how can CMOs really prepare for this new reality?
Yeah, and it depends on the industry. Sometimes CMOs are evaluated on pipeline if they're in B2B. But at the end of the day, all CMOs today are being judged more precisely on numbers versus sort of soft metrics like brand awareness. There's a great study that I think that's like 79, 80% of CMOs now carry a number like their sales counterpart. And only 10 years ago, that number was in the 20s. So it's an amazing change and increase. I actually think it's really good. I think it's really good for marketers and marketing because marketing does have a really big impact on the company. And depending, obviously marketing has different scale motions depending on the type of company. Sometimes it's, selling to a lot of customers in a very scaled way. Sometimes it's selling to a very small number of customers in a direct selling way. There's lots of different motions. But when marketing can put a value on what they're delivering to the organization, they become more valuable and it's easier for the company to make investments in marketing. And when marketing can't define its value, it's very hard for people to know how to fund it. And so classically, marketing has been one of those functions that people will cut right away because it's easy to take that money because it doesn't seem to be doing anything. And so, or people are just kind of investing based on a whim or a belief. When you know that if I take $1, I'm going to lose 50 cents, I'm going to lose $1, I'm going to lose $2, suddenly, it's a very different metric. And you'll see this in sales. There's usually a sales productivity model. And I can very easily say, hey, if I don't hire these new sellers, or if I get rid of this group of sellers, this is how much my revenue is going to drop. Like you can tell. So classically, sales doesn't get cut. And quite frankly, in downturns or in times where times are tough, often sales gets invested in. You even get more people going into that area where there's a cut in marketing. So I think it's a mistake because the scale motion of marketing does add a lot of value to the company. So I do think that more marketers can attach themselves to a number that the CEO cares about, the more likely they are to get invested in, and the more likely they are to build the marketing function in a way that will help the company grow quickly.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Middle East market as such. Many of the brands see Middle East as an emerging market. So I wanted your thoughts on how do you classify a market which is emerging, which is maturing? How do you really gauge the responsiveness or maturity of a market?
So this is a super interesting question because the concept of emerging markets goes to a lot of different issues on the brand. And so what I've found very interesting in some of the emerging markets is that you not only need to think about your branding and advertising, but even the packaging and the size of the package. Like there are a lot of emerging markets where, say in packaged goods, packaging size is much smaller because the way that income is distributed, the way people are paid, the amount of money people have is done in a way that's very different from, say, the Costco model in the US, where people load up a truck with stuff and bring it home. In a lot of these other markets, people are buying every day. They've got a different sort of market reality. They may have different space in their home, so they don't have room for storage. They may get paid frequently, but in little amounts, so they want to buy smaller sort of package sizes. Like all those kinds of things have a factor in it. And so as you think about emerging markets, what you have to think about is what is all the kind of customer realities that may make you change your formulation, your product, your packaging, your pricing, et cetera. The second thing is that when you think about your advertising, and we're going to get a little bit to modern channels with this part as well, is you do have to think about how do I stay hyper-local? How do I stay hyper-relevant? How do I make sure that the people in this market know that we're here, that we've thought about them, we've thought about what makes sense for them, that the scent is relevant to their culture, right? This is a huge problem in many cases. Things like scent and colors and stuff are not thought through. Is the scent right? Is the packaging translated in a way that it makes sense? Even that's sometimes difficult to do. Have we priced it correctly? Like all those things need to be culturally relevant, and then you need to be able to have advertising and communication that connects that way. And this is where modern channels can be really powerful, because you can actually start to talk and have conversations with people in that culture, in their language, with people who are from that culture, right? So you got to keep everyone on the same page. And then suddenly people feel like this brand is part of where we are and part of who we are, and it feels more local. If you don't do that, if you just kind of swoop in from above with a one size fits all, typically you're going to fail.
Interesting. So my final question to you, a book that you highly recommend?
Yes. Well, so there are, I'm a big reader, and there are a number of books I talk about on my podcast. So first I'm going to plug the podcast for a second, because I do make a lot of book suggestions there, and I'm going to give you one book, which I think is an amazing book. And so the podcast is called The Unified CXM Experience, and we've got about 140 episodes now. We just keep doing them here at Sprinklr. And what's great about it is that we just talk about CXM the whole time. And so we have people come on. I had Tom Peters last week, which was really amazing. He's one of my business heroes. And we have different guests who are from customers and from different areas of the CX world. I sometimes just go on a rant and talk about something that happened to me. We'll talk about digital transformation. It's a great series. So tune into that. You can get the Unified CXM Experience on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or 30 other podcasting platforms. And I'm the only Grad Conn. So if search on me or CXM Experience, or believe it or not, there are not a lot of CXM podcasts out there right now. And so you can find it pretty easily. In terms of books, there's a fantastic book about someone named Albert Lasker. And the book's called The Man Who Sold America. The Man Who Sold America. And it's the story of Albert Lasker. And Albert Lasker was one of the great innovators in advertising. People like Claude Hopkins and Joe E. Kennedy all worked for him. And these were people who really formed advertising. They invented orange juice as a thing we drank with breakfast. They invented the feminine hygiene category. It's an amazing story there. They invented political advertising, which, maybe not such a great thing, but they were the first ones to do political advertising. And at one point, Albert Lasker was the wealthiest individual in the United States. And his estates in Chicago are still sort of legendary. But this story of how essentially the shift that advertising made, which was in the early days when J. Walter Thompson started advertising, he basically said, hey, how do I aggregate media buys and do a more efficient media buying process? Big innovation, big idea. It's how the 15% commission came about. But that was kind of where that stopped. What Albert Lasker and his team did is they said, hey, if we created more effective advertising, then our clients would buy more of it, and we would sell more ads, and we'd make more money. And so they're the first ones to say, look at creative as a strategic investment to create sustainable competitive advantage. And they did a lot of work to understand how to sell at scale. And although the language and the idioms are a little off because it was 100 years ago, the lessons that they learned and the way that they thought about humans and human psychology and the psychology of persuasion are as relevant today as they've ever been, maybe even more relevant in some ways. So I encourage anyone who's thinking about marketing and advertising or who's in the field to read that book, because I do believe it's very important to understand the roots of the thing you're in, to really understand the thing that you do and how to take it to the next level.
Definitely. And thank you so much for that recommendation. I'll certainly pick that book up. And again, as you said, there's only one Grad Conn. So people would have no trouble finding you online.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Grad, for this insightful discussion. It's always a pleasure to host you. And I look forward to catching up again. And again, thank you so much for taking our time.
Thanks, Ravi. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.